All right, everybody, welcome back. We are doing a deep dive today, and I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, this will be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So we are talking about crisis communication.
Uh-huh.
And specifically, how media intelligence plays into it.
Mm-hmm.
We are taking excerpts from Reactive to Proactive, Leveraging Media Intelligence in Crisis Communication by Philip Odiakos.
Okay.
And the reason I picked this one is because there's a case study in here
Right?
about a bottling company in Nigeria
Oh, wow.
that was able to actually turn a contamination scare into a PR win,
Really?
all thanks to their use of media monitoring.
Interesting.
I thought that was super fascinating. I wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, how did they do that? How did they use that?
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So first of all, when we're talking about crisis communication, we're talking about when a company or an organization faces like a major threat to its reputation.
Right.
And that could be anything from a product recall to a natural disaster, data breach.
Yeah, or even like a viral video or a negative news story or social media campaign.
Exactly. Any of those can really damage a company's image.
Absolutely. And so the whole point of crisis communication is to try to mitigate those threats
Right.
and protect the reputation. And that's where this whole idea of media intelligence comes into play.
Right. And, media intelligence is really becoming more and more important,
Right.
in crisis communication because of the way news spreads. Like, especially with social media and the internet, it can just explode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so you really have to be on top of things and understand what people are saying and how they're feeling about the situation.
Yeah, and it's so fast, too.
Oh, yeah. It's a 24/7.
Yeah, it used to be that you could kind of wait until the next day's newspaper
Right.
and react, but now it's like instantaneous.
Yeah. You got to be right on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this case study with the bottling company in Nigeria.
Right.
So basically what happened is this video went viral.
Alleging that one of their products was contaminated.
Oh, no.
And it just caused this like huge uproar on social media.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are understandably concerned, if they're thinking like they're drinking something that might be contaminated.
Right.
So the company brought in P Plus Measurement Services, which is this media monitoring and intelligence company,
Okay.
to help them manage the situation.
Yeah.
So what P Plus did is they started by just like gathering data
Okay.
from all different sources, like news articles, social media posts, blogs, forums, anywhere where people were talking about this incident.
So they're like really just trying to get a handle on like what's out there, what are people saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just trying to get a sense of like the scope of the problem and like where the conversation is happening. And that's a monitoring part,
Okay.
right? They're monitoring the media, but it goes beyond that.
Right.
Because once they had all of this data, they actually started to analyze it. So they were looking at, which media outlets were covering the story, how it was spreading geographically.
Okay.
And they were also using something called sentiment analysis to try to gauge the overall public sentiment.
Sentiment analysis.
Yeah, sentiment analysis.
Now, what is that?
So basically it's like they use specialized tools that can analyze the language that people are using in their posts and articles.
Okay.
And it can determine like the emotional tone behind the words.
Wow.
So it's not just looking at whether the coverage is positive or negative. It's actually trying to understand, like, are people expressing anger, fear, sadness, confusion?
That's really interesting.
That's like reading between the lines to get a sense of like what's going on.
So what did they find? Like, what was the sentiment in this case?
Well, that's the interesting part. So they found that the sentiment wasn't overwhelmingly negative.
Oh.
Instead, they noticed a spike in words like scared and confused, which indicated that the public was actually more fearful than angry.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So they're not necessarily mad at the company. They're just like really scared and concerned about their safety.
Right.
So that was like a really crucial insight
Okay.
because it informed how the company decided to respond.
Okay. So how did that respond? What did they do differently?
Well, instead of getting defensive, which is like a very common reaction in these situations, they actually took a very proactive and transparent approach.
Oh, okay.
So they acknowledged the fear. They addressed concerns head on.
Yeah.
They highlighted their safety protocols.
Okay.
And they focused on empathy and reassurance rather than trying to like downplay the situation or shift the blame.
I see. So they're basically using those insights from the sentiment analysis to craft their message.
Exactly.
And how did that work out for them?
Well, the results were amazing. So not only did sales recover quickly, but the company actually saw an increase in positive brand perception.
Wow. So they really turned things around.
Yeah, they turned a potential disaster into a success story
Yeah.
by using media intelligence to understand their audience and tailor their communication accordingly.
That's amazing. So it's not just about monitoring what's being said.
Right.
It's about analyzing the sentiment and understanding those nuances.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to understand those whys behind the whats.
So wise.
Yeah. So what are some of the key takeaways from this whole case study? Like, why should our listeners care about media intelligence?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of being proactive. Don't wait for a crisis to strike before thinking about media intelligence.
Right.
It's a valuable tool for understanding your audience, shaping your communication, and building stronger relationships in general.
Even when things are going well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can help you identify potential issues early on.
Right.
Maybe spot emerging trends and just stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point. I feel like a lot of people think of media intelligence as like a reactive tool.
Yeah.
Like something you only use when something bad has already happened.
Right.
But it can be so valuable for preventing those bad things from happening in the first place.
Exactly.
By just like staying informed and being aware of what's going on.
Right. Keeping your finger on the pulse.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I would just encourage everyone to really think about how understanding your audience's sentiment can help you navigate any communication challenge, whether it's a full-blown crisis or just like a minor misunderstanding.
Right.
Putting yourself in their shoes and really trying to understand their perspective can make all the difference.
That is great advice. This has been such an insightful deep dive. It makes you think about all the ways we can use these tools to communicate more effectively.
Yeah.
Not just in a crisis, but in everyday situations. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration.
Sounds good.